Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending Science Café OSU. I'm Dr. Adam Stroud. I'm a co-coordinator of Science Café along with my colleague, Kevin Dyke. Just to introduce the program and what we'll be doing tonight, I have a couple quick statements for you. So Science Café is an event that highlights current, interesting, and relevant research and endeavors of OSU scientists, scholars, and students. This event is an opportunity to participate in lively and engaging conversations about science-related projects here in the OSU community. Before I introduce tonight's speakers, I would like to thank the OSU Libraries, the Edmund Lowe Library Communication Services team, and the Office of the Vice President for Research for their support of Science Café OSU. Thank you to you all. Tonight we are pleased to have presenting Dr. John Hugh, Dr. Erin Dyke, and included in their project is Dr. James Stine, who will not be here this evening. To introduce and give you a little bit of background of this interdisciplinary team that will be presenting this evening, Dr. John Hugh received his PhD in electrical and computer engineering from the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. He is currently an assistant professor and Jack H. Graham Endowed Fellow of Engineering at Oklahoma State University. Also on this team is James Stine. He received his PhD in electrical engineering from Lehigh University. He is currently the Edward Julian Endowed Chair and professor in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Oklahoma State University. And then we have Erin Dyke, who is an associate professor of curriculum studies at Oklahoma State University. Erin received her PhD in curriculum and instruction from the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. This evening, our presenters will discuss their interdisciplinary research project titled Promoting Semiconductor Research and Education with Oklahoma STEM Teachers. Our first speaker tonight is Dr. John Hugh. We will now welcome him up. Thank you for being here this evening. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam, for the very nice introduction. And first off, it's my great honor to be here with Science Cafe. And again, welcome everyone in attendance and welcome to the audience in online attendance as well. So what we're going to talk about tonight are a few things that we did for the past summer. But really, we have spent quite a while conceiving about the project, and we are really excited to share what we've done so far and what we plan to go in the future. So to get things started, let me start by introducing everyone what are semiconductors. And next, what exactly did we did? So we did an RET, which stands for Research Experience for Teachers. So what was our RET program about? And of course, we would like to introduce some specifics about digital circuits, analog circuits. And last but not the least, probably the most important one is how can we bring this message to our Oklahoma STEM teachers? And what are their educational context? What are the curriculum structure? And then how can we help them make this delivery more effective in terms of educational methods? So, what is a semiconductor? Well, as the name implies, semiconductor is something that semi-conducts. It doesn't conduct fully. It doesn't insulate fully like an insulator either. So if you remember a few things from your high school chemistry class, here is the elements table that you will see a portion of it. We have column 3, column 4, column 5. So there's metal on one side, whereas the other material is on the other side. Semiconductors happens to be the column number 4, where we have carbon, silicon, germanium, and even a few more elements. So these elements, they don't fully insulate like an insulator, neither do they conduct electricity perfectly like metal. So they are called semiconductors. And the great thing about it is their conductivity can be controlled. So if we apply a certain amount of electric field, certain voltage, they can behave just like a perfect metal, or at other times behave like a perfect insulator. And thanks to this controllability of semiconductor, we are able to store information, process information, and which leads to all the electronic device that we're using today. Probably you are using to watch the YouTube or using the smartphone to check our text messages. Okay. So now that we know what semiconductors are, there's also another name that's been in the news for a while, which is called chips, or the formal name is integrated circuits. So chips are essentially the tiny little devices that form the brain of our everyday electronics. So if you ever happen to watch a video where the people disassemble an iPhone, so once you open up the iPhone, underneath the cover, you will have a circuit board where it's populated fully, front and back, with different type of chips, many of them very tiny, and then those are the integrated circuits that we mean oftentimes when we say semiconductors. So semiconductors, we may mean the material, or we may mean the chip. They actually go into our phones. Okay. So I kind of already hinted a few places where you can find a few chips, for instance, your iPhone. But actually, there are a lot more places where you will find chips inside. So for today's conversation, I borrowed a few slides from a Toyota dealer, a car dealer, from Orlando, Florida. And then, by the way, if you recall, for the past few years during the COVID pandemic, many of us have a hard time finding a car, buying a car, and then we were wondering why this was the case. So the Toyota car dealer tried to explain to their customers why they couldn't find enough cars they want to buy. So I'm going to borrow their content and paraphrase their Q&A one by one. So hopefully that can demystify this whole chip idea and why do we suffer from its shortage in the first place. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to read the statements verbatim and then comment on a few words saying whether they are truth or false, or there's anything I would like to add. First, car chips are also known as semiconductors or microchips. They're essentially the brain of all modern electronics, think phones, computers, tablets, and work as a type of electrical circuit. True. I mean, it's very, very good description of what chips and semiconductors are. Number two, they're made from silicon and are highly engineered with a series of transistors that act as tiny switches to control the flow of electrons. Again, this is a very good description. It gets to the point where we say semiconductors has the conductivity that has to be controlled. So hence, the transistor acts as switches to control the flow of electrons. The chips vary in complexity and are incredibly versatile. You'll find them in everything from new Orlando Toyotas all the way down to electric toothbrushes. Yes, that's true. They're very small, like very small. Actually, a single chip transistor is 10,000 times smaller than a human hair, if that gives you an idea of how small we are talking about. Again, I wouldn't say that the transistor, let me just put one thing here. The transistor size will depend on the process we use. So on average, 10,000 times, and I would say today's transistor is even smaller than the 10,000 times that's quoted here, compared to the size of your hair. The chip shortage began when COVID-19 pandemic hit, as it slowed production and caused major shipping delays across the globe. True, that is what we all experienced. Unfortunately, building semiconductor chips is a very complex process. It takes a lot of time and money to do it. And because of that, there are only a few places in the world that semiconductors can be produced. They're churning out as many as they can, but are struggling to keep up with the demand. So this statement was true for the past 2 years when we have the chip shortage across the globe. So thankfully, we are slowly getting out of these chip shortages, and it is our hope that this situation will get better over time. The next two statements. It takes about 12 weeks to build an average semiconductor chip, and up to 20 weeks for advanced chips. At this point in the game, the lead time for a chip order is 6 months. Okay. Again, as an expert, I would say this statement is pretty much true. Well, of course, we give and take, depending on what type of chip you are talking about, it can take more than 20 weeks. For instance, the advanced 7 nanometer process that is made in Taiwan probably even take longer than that one. Well, when it comes to the lead time, of course, this comes to whether the vendor has chips in storage or they have to buy a new one. So if Toyota have to experience 6 months of wait time back in 2021, then it must be true for them. Final statement, it's not as simple as just opening new plants to produce the chips. It takes years and billions of dollars to get the production facility up and running. True, and I cannot agree with that more. That's why we are here to talk about how we can potentially solve this problem. Right. So the next section I take from the car dealer is that the car dealer is trying to explain to their customers what caused the chip shortage. So what's behind it? So first, the two reasons that the car dealer gives is that first, modern cars use more chips than previous generations of vehicles. There are a lot of high-tech features for safety, entertainment, performance, and more in these cars, and each of these features rely on chips to make the magic happen. This statement is true, and I can even add a few examples to that one if we have time. There are, for instance, the blind spot detector that needs a chip. If you want to connect to satellite, that needs a chip. And if you want to control your touch screen on the car dashboard, that needs a dedicated chip as well, so yes. Second, forecasting for supply and demand was thrown off by the COVID-19 pandemic. Back in March 2020, when the pandemic first hit, shutdowns and quarantines made auto manufacturers think that the demand for new cars would drop. So they forecasted fewer sales and in return canceled orders for car chips. Spoiler alert, they were wrong. Demand dropped temporarily, but bounced back right up. Hence, the whole nation went into a mode of car shortage because of the chip shortage. True. And one more statement, if I may add, is that once the car dealers, if they cancel the order, there's another business line that kind of putting a lot of orders, which is the manufacturer of computers. So when most of us convert to working from home at that time, many started to buy new laptops, new computers for your home, which you never thought you would need. So Intel, AMD, they fill up the order pretty quickly at the fabrication plants. So once those spots are filled, then the cars will have to wait in lines for them to get their chips. And hence, I think the second point shows us why we have this wait. The final slide I would like to borrow from the Toyota dealer is about the car price. So when will the car chip shortage end? Of course, this webpage was made in 2021, so they were predicting about the future. And if we look at the data today, the new car sales price from July 2020 to July of 2023, this year, so it went up as each year's new model came in, as we can see here, and it only slightly dropped over time. But we are really hoping that this chip shortage would be over soon, and some may say, well, in some cases where we already seen that we are recovering from this backlog, but really, at this point, the new car prices is still higher than what they were in July of 2020. Of course, inflation could be one thing, but you can see the value that the semiconductors are providing to something which we tend to think about as a mechanical engineering part, like a car. Okay, so with that backdrop, I would like to kind of explain another thing that you might have heard in the news, which is about the CHIPS and Science Act passed by the US House, both House and Senate, signed by the President into law in 2022. It includes $52 billion of federal investment So the pie chart on the left shows what are the major components of the CHIPS Act. So the 3/4 of it, the blue-colored share, is where the government provides incentive for the private sector to build fabrication plants here in the United States of America. And that alone constitutes $39 billion of the $52 billion of the federal investments. And the next big chunk is indicated by the pie in brown. That is the advanced microelectronics research and development effort here in the United States, coming up to a total of $11 billion. And among the smaller portions, of course, we have the CHIPS for America Defense Fund, CHIP for America Security and Innovation Fund, and an important one related to today's topic, CHIPS for America Workforce and Education Fund, and of course, finally, the Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund. So as you are digesting this pie, let me just say a few words about the motivation to everyone. So what motivates the US for passing this bill? So we need to know a historic trend or a fact, which is that the US semiconductor manufacturing share among the world has fallen for the past decades. In the 70s and 80s, United States used to produce 39% of the world's semiconductor chips. As of 2021, this percentage fell to 13%. So again, from somewhere close to 40% to just 13% of semiconductors made in the US. And some of us in the industry may have a good reason for that, because many companies take on what we call a fabless model, meaning that we separate the design and the fabrication of semiconductors. So you can design in one company and then send your design, finished design, to a fabrication plant somewhere else in the world. This fabless model makes sense for many companies. But as a nation, this puts the United States vulnerable to a number of things, such as supply chain disruption, trade disputes, and last but not the least, military conflict risk. Because as the US is losing the percentage, the majority of the production right now is in East Asia, and in particularly in Taiwan. And if you've been following the news a little bit, you know where Taiwan is sitting, to the southeast of China. And then if the war in Ukraine taught us anything, it is that the world remains a dangerous place. If we are ever going to experience something as unpredictable as a military conflict, then this fabless model for the United States as a country is going to be risky and unacceptable for our national security as well as for our national economic development. So it is under this backdrop that the US House decided to pass this investment, and then it is under this backdrop that with these new investments, let's say that with the federal government putting in the investments, private companies is also following up with their own investment in terms of building new plants here. So this is the latest data from this July, 2023. So we are right here at the vertical bar where the CHIPS Act has been enacted for just about a year. And if we predict what we are going to need by 2030, how many workers that we need to fill those plants, we are looking at roughly 67,000 jobs of a gap left unfilled if our educational system remains the way it is today. So these new jobs would span across manufacturing, design, and if you look at the degrees that the people need to hold in order to participate in these jobs, so on the right-hand side, who is missing? We have 13,000 computer scientists, 27,000 engineers, spanning from a bachelor degree, master's degree, to a doctorate degree. And the very bottom, we see a huge chunk of green box, 26,000 technicians, which are the people that do not necessarily possess a college degree or an advanced degree, but is still needed in this industry. So as New York Times put it, United States now have a new challenge. So how do we produce enough workers to take advantage of the federal investment? And it is under this backdrop that we had this summer project going on. So we called it Research Experience for Teachers. We have an RET site. So if you think about the need to train enough workers to be able to work in the area, many high school and community colleges currently do not have any semiconductor-related curriculum. So this was first reported in the state of New York in 2010. But after 13 years, it remains pretty much the same thing in Oklahoma. That, again, our high school teachers experience the same kind of lack of material at their level. So what we do, our team did is that we proposed to a National Science Foundation to run the first chip design RET in the United States, starting from 2023, going all the way to 2025. So the motivation is clear. If we know that we want to have community college and high school students involved, of course, they can come up to college, get a degree, and then take on those engineering positions. But what if they never have the chance, or due to all kinds of constraints, they cannot come to college? We need to provide a pathway so that once they graduate from high school, or once they graduate from community college, they can also participate in this economy, semiconductor economy. And that red question mark is the thing that we're trying to fill. Currently, we don't have any semiconductor curriculum that is applicable to their grade levels in their college or in their high school. So, hence, we would like to do something with their teachers, and then apparently summer is the best time. It's the only time where the high school teachers can have a break. And so we propose to take 6 weeks of the teachers' time, bring them to OSU, and then give them an immersive internship or research experience, depending how you look at it, to introduce them to the basic concepts of semiconductors. So here I listed out the 6-week schedule at a very high level, what we have the teachers do together with us. In week 1, we want to introduce teachers to the semiconductor basics, just like the ones that I talked to you about. In addition, we provide some basic curriculum training, and my partner, Dr. Dyke, is going to talk more about this in a short moment. And in addition to that, we provide some lab tours for the teachers here on the research facility we have on campus here at OSU. In the second week, we used a few tools like Siloweeds and Walkwe to let teachers get hands-on on the things they learned in week 1. Week 3, we have a midterm presentation. Let teachers discuss what they've learned so far, what is their progress, what are their challenges. And then week 4 and week 5, we further break down into 2 detailed projects. One is what we call analog, the other is what we call digital. Basically, there are 2 types of chips in the world. One is analog chip, the other big category is digital chips. And Dr. Stine, who's not able to be here today, so he's taking care of the digital project. I was leading the analog project. So we kind of break the teachers into two groups. And finally, on the last week, many of our teachers was able to present what they've done, what they found, what they've learned in the virtual poster session organized by National Science Foundation among all the RET teachers around the nation. And we also do a physical poster session here in the Endeavor Lab. So that's kind of a high-level summary of what we did this summer. And I'm very happy to introduce my colleague, Dr. Erin Dyke, to talk more about the curriculum part and the rest. Okay, so thank you, Erin.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about designing curriculum with teachers. So there we are. I want to make sure to mention Dr. Woo Choi, who was originally a part of conceiving the project, did a lot of work with teachers in the first week to teach them about what semiconductors are. and he left to take on a fabulous job at Seoul National University. I also want to mention we had 3 really fabulous graduate research assistants that were crucial in supporting the teachers to ask questions, very detailed questions, and figure out answers to their questions. Andrew Ash, Zach Wilson, and Hanie Mehraban. So our teachers were coming from a lot of different contexts, K-12, K-14 context really. So we had a teacher coming from a community college context in Stillwater, teaching math to regional students, but also mainly OSU students who were getting credit for their OSU degrees. A teacher from coming from rural context, 1 teacher from Kingfisher, 2 from Cushing, and then we had 6 teachers from Oklahoma City, 5 teachers who were coming from a public charter school serving primarily working class Latinx students, and a professor at Oklahoma School of Science and Mathematics, which is a regional residential public school that draws and recruits students from across the state. It's very highly selective, very competitive and rigorous, and the majority of their professors there have a PhD, including our participant, Delwar, who has his PhD in chemistry. We had another teacher who had her PhD in educational leadership. We had a very diverse group of teachers in terms of the subjects that they taught, in terms of the languages that they spoke, in terms of the teaching experiences that they had. A large group of teachers had international teaching experience in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Cote d'Ivoire, in European countries. We had a very wide range of diversity that was really interesting to bring together in one space. They did have one thing in common, and that was they did not know much about semiconductors before they started this project, and neither did I, but now I know a little bit. So we had a lot of challenges because we were all coming into it not knowing much about what semiconductors are, what chips are. They were learning these really complex ideas and skills while they were simultaneously thinking about how they're going to teach this to their students. So they really struggled through learning the content, but in really productive ways, right? They also faced disciplinary constraints. Many teachers were coming from subjects that are tested and standardized tests. So I should mention the reason why they're developing curriculum is because there's expectations that this year they will implement curriculum based on what they learned. And they all developed really wonderful, amazing curriculum. But at first they struggled a little bit because in terms of finding the wiggle room, most K-12 teachers lack a breadth of autonomy in their curriculum design. In K-12 context, often there are a lot of pressures for schools to purchase curriculum that can improve students' performance on standardized tests, and there's a lot of pressures to have good test scores because that's how there's consequences for resource allocation, there's consequences for accreditation, there's consequences for enrollment, and so there's a lot of pressure. And so teachers sometimes feel the lack of autonomy in their curriculum design. And teachers were coming from lots of different experiences, and most teachers in the group had 10 to 20 or more years of experience teaching, but maybe a little bit less experience or training in curriculum design and development. And so we spent a lot of time doing that. They also, so Dr. Hu mentioned that, a big push and the reason why this project got funded is because there are workforce development concerns with the emphasis on investing in expanding fabrication of chips in the United States. Well, those jobs don't yet exist here or regionally, and so, especially our teachers who are working with working class students, rural students who experience barriers to, going to get a four-year degree in engineering or an advanced degree where there are more jobs in the semiconductor industry in the U.S., trying to help them to see what the workforce possibilities was a little bit of a challenge at first. But it was also an opportunity because we didn't just discuss or think about semiconductors in the context of how can we funnel students into particular jobs. But something that we discussed a lot in our time together is thinking about, because semiconductors are the brain of modern electronics, they shape so much of our lives, not even just the electronics that we use, but also have profound implications for the transportation industry, for healthcare, for so many things that really, kind of shape our lives in very tangible ways, that we can engage students in becoming more literate and understanding about what chips are. I am a grown adult who uses lots of things that require chips, and just having a brief window over the 6 weeks in the context of working over a longer period of time with Dr. Hu and others, learning about the sort of societal issues, the political implications, the economic issues, the global economy of the chip industry. It's really important to engage students in these conversations to help them understand the significance of the chip industry in their daily lives, and to be able to participate in conversations, especially as it's coming more to the fore with, for example, the Chips and Science Act. Teachers also, over the 6 weeks, fostered professional networks and a sense of community. They continue to send articles and emails back and forth, sharing resources since we parted ways at the end of the summer. They learned across their cultural, linguistic, religious, and geographic contexts and backgrounds. They shared stories of their teaching experience. So this is important, because in our everyday work as teachers in K-12 contexts, there are not often a lot of opportunities for teachers to get together and reflect deeply on their teaching, to talk about their relationships with their students, and to think about and collaborate on curriculum design. So that was a really wonderful experience for teachers to be able to have. They also discussed, developing a sense of empathy, embodied empathy, toward their students' perspectives as learners as they struggled through, figuring out the material and working with really new to them ideas and applications. And then they also got to expand their imaginations and creatively design curriculum to wonder and think about their disciplinary subjects through the lens of semiconductors, to see how knowledge and information that they teach as part of their subject areas in chemistry or math are actually tangibly applied in the design and production of chips. So that was really neat. To do our curriculum work, we engaged a sort of tripart framework. So we thought about, how do we approach curriculum design in ways that are culturally relevant? So how are we really thinking about the students who are in our classrooms and how to teach them specifically about semiconductors? We engaged this idea that we want to design curriculum that is concept-based. So really centering big ideas, big questions, and designing curriculum around those. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then we used backwards design to sort of structure our work. Excuse me. So we start with those big ideas, and we kind of work backward from there. So what do we, if we want students to have a fluency and proficiency and this deeper conceptual understanding, then how do we know that they're going to get there? How are we going to assess them? How are they going to show us? And then, at the very end, working out the details by deciding on the learning plan. So we spent the most amount of time as teachers were, from week 1 when we did a couple workshops on curriculum and had conversations throughout the 6 weeks, and then in the last week we spent a lot of time on curriculum design, thinking about these big ideas and big questions. And this is really important because, like I mentioned before, so the ways in which standardized testing can kind of shape the way we do learning in schools, can sort of make us default into this banking style of education, where students are sort of these empty vessels, and as teachers sort of pump discrete information and skills into them that they can then reproduce on a test. Instead, we're thinking asking teachers to develop curriculum and think like engineers. And so we did a little bit of work in the beginning thinking about the engineering design process, where students are identifying needs and asking questions, identifying problems, researching, imagining solutions, planning, creating, testing, and improving. And so thinking about also how in our Oklahoma academic standards that this deeper conceptual understanding is what we aim for as well, even though they're not always used in that way. And so as you can see, on the left side, we have the science standards for Oklahoma, and in the middle are core disciplinary knowledge. And then the middle ring are scientific practices that students should be learning. So they're very active. They're developing and using models. They're conducting investigations. They're analyzing. They're communicating. They're arguing from evidence, right? And then on the outside are cross-cutting concepts. These are concepts that are important across all disciplines. All scientific disciplines require, a conceptual understanding of patterns, cause and effect, energy and matter, right? So we spent the most amount of time really thinking about these big concepts that we want students to come away with at the end of their curriculum units. And so I'll just shift and share a little bit about each of the curriculum that teachers came up with to give you a sense of how teachers took what they learned around semiconductors and then translated that into curriculum. So we had, and I think something that was really important and interesting to me as we did this work is that, especially our math and science teachers, really thinking about this as an opportunity to show how the knowledge that they teach in their courses, that they can use this curriculum to show students how these are applied in the real world in really tangible ways. So geometry, these ideas of logical reasoning and syllogisms are applied in digital circuit design and designing curriculum around helping students to understand that. Our AP Calculus teacher thinking about how we can apply principles of calculus like second order linear differential equations to analyze RLC circuits and their behavior under various conditions. And then we had a teacher who had very little wiggle room in her algebraic functions course at a community college, and so was able to design a few lessons around Ohm's law, which she had to teach, but showing students how it can be used to describe what's happening and solve for missing variables in a circuit. And at the same time, her curriculum also engaged students in reading articles and watching videos that helped them to understand some of what Dr. Hu talked about in the beginning, the sort of global political economic issues of semiconductors and how they are part of our everyday lives. Chemistry, thinking about what Dr. Hu talked about earlier about how semiconductors, we can control their conductivity through doping, understanding diodes and transistors. We had our professor at OSSM designed an entire course around semiconductors with chemistry, and I believe had aims to involve a physics professor in it. Yep. Thinking about digital circuit design in the context of a robotics course, learning more about the semiconductor industry itself, and then in computer science, we had a couple of computer science teachers, had prescribed curriculum that they were using for their computer science courses, but were able to think about how they could integrate topics throughout their course and actually engage students in digitally designing a circuit by the end of their curriculum. So it was really cool to see all the innovative ideas where teachers could find the wiggle room in their teaching to translate and engage students in learning about semiconductors. And I'll just end with this canonical question in my field in curriculum studies: what knowledge is of most worth? And so I think RET programs like this are really crucial because usually only in K-12 education, especially these days in Oklahoma, only a few people get to answer that question for our students. But the RET program, like we experienced this summer and we hope to continue to experience in the next couple of summers, teachers get to come to campus. They get to engage with and have access to all the knowledge resources at the university. They get time and incentive to study and research and think deeply, and then to translate those ideas back into the classroom. And they get to, in doing so, they get to answer this question for themselves and in the context of their situated classrooms and communities. And that's really cool. And I'm going to end there.
Okay, thank you to both of our speakers. That was great. We'll let you take a moment, get a drink of water. We're going to shift now into our question and answer portion. I know we'll be fielding potentially some questions from here in the audience and from our online audience. And as those questions are populating, making their way to us to be shared this evening, I will begin with the question, if that is okay. So your last slide, we look at what knowledge is of most worth. I think your group project is representative of efforts to kind of de-silo departments and fields, expertise, to bring your knowledge together to impact our community. So I'm curious, are there examples of significant importance that you learned from each other as you are coming from different backgrounds that you would be willing to share of something that stood out, as you may have both been new to this type of project before? So as the questions are coming up, I will just ask the presenters to come and sit up here. After you answer this, hopefully okay question, the questions from the online audience will be read out loud, and then if you could just repeat those for everybody to be able to hear, that would be great. Okay, thank you both. All right.
Sure. Well, like I mentioned, semiconductors, you know, I am no electrical engineer. I come from more of a cultural studies background, and so it was, I learned so much about semiconductors. I got to tour Dr. Who's lab and look and see what he does and how he spends even years designing and testing and designing and testing chips, and they're so tiny, and how careful you have to be with them. And you know, just I learned so much about the significance of what Dr. Who does and what chips are, in ways that I really you know, talked throughout the 6 weeks as I was learning about this. I talked my husband's ear off every night about what I was learning, and he's probably sick of hearing me talk about semiconductors.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that. Yeah, for me, I think the question was, what is the things we learn from each other? So obviously, as engineers, we are often considered as the geek in the room. We like I showed, we spent a year designing a chip. It failed. We come back, we fixed it. They taped it out again. Come back, it failed somewhere else. So it is not until the third time the chip actually would function. So. So during this whole time, I think that what I learned most from the colleagues and the teachers is how to, what are the real challenges in the classrooms, and what do our students experience when they are learning this thing, which we try to take for granted because we've been working for it so long. But the students, the first time they learn it, they will see all kinds of difficulties. As an engineering faculty, for us to know that they exist, and then hopefully learn a few ways that we can make our classroom delivery, our coursework structure to be more friendly for the first-time learners. That's one thing that stands out to me on top, that I find that this kind of an interdisciplinary team is really helpful. So hopefully that answers your question.
I saw that you had hit all grade levels and all of these topics. Is there grade levels that you were aiming at, or was it K through 12? Do you think that it's applicable for the littles as well as those high school age students?
Okay, so the question is that during this program, are we aiming for a specific grade? And then the second one is that, do we think that this material is applicable to just those grades or to a much broader span of kids' study? So yes, for the first part in our program, for these 3 years, we are targeting grade 9 to 14, which means high school 3 years, and community college, we have 2 years. So this is just our program currently. In terms of this subject, I think it could be potentially applicable to a wider range of kids. And obviously, then the difficulty becomes that at each grade level, as I'm trying to kind of speak my mind here, at each grade level, they may have different knowledge, they may have different things with science, physics, math. So trying to teach that complex subject of chips to a kid at different level of understanding, is particularly their brain development, will require even more innovation on our part, I guess. Erin, do you want to?
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. I think there are definitely possibilities for building up some foundational knowledge and even engaging young children in understanding what goes into making their iPads and their switches, you know? Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibility. I think it's important to emphasize part of the significance of this work as well is that there really isn't a lot of curriculum, even for high school or community college context, around teaching about semiconductors. It's mostly considered something that you might do in college or even in graduate school. And so I think for teachers to be able to bring their expertise to translate their learning into curriculum and offer, you know, we hope to be able to share their curriculum, you know, once they're testing it and you know, be able to share that more widely. And yeah, because as we were, you know, kind of combing the internet, there are some resources and some examples, but it's very, very sparse.
Speaking of which, if I may just add one thing, I have a 2-year-old, and then he's already figuring out how to use my iPad each time we didn't lock the screen. So as the kids grow up, they probably get pretty good at using the smartphone and smart devices at a very young age. And it is unthinkable that we can't at least teach them some basics about how those things work, the things that they're playing YouTube on. And I think there are actually a few examples around the world that this is indeed becoming a trend. There's a company called eFabless, which is in a way a partner of our program, even though not directly. So their CEO actually made a very bold statement. They want to create a world where every 14-year-old can design a chip. Digital chip, of course, in this case, event. So thanks to the digital design where they have high level of abstraction, so each level of abstraction does not need to know everything about the other stuff, so that they have this aspirational goal of each 14-year-old in the United States will be able to design a chip. I think that is the right direction we should be thinking about as an educator, is that how to make that happen and how to make that more, not just for digital chips, but all types of chips as well. So, okay.
But when I, got admitted to universities with that particular program, I didn't have, any opportunities to learn, actually, as a graduate student. So it seems that we here in the United States we experience lack of these programs in our work. Am I right? Or not?
Okay, so your question is that as an international student coming to the United States pursuing a graduate degree, you initially have the interest in semiconductors. Once you come here, you've discovered that you actually don't have a lot of opportunities to learn about the things you would like to learn. Okay, is that true? So let me speak for my school, School of Electrical and Computer Engineering, which is conventionally tasked of delivering these educational materials. So one challenge, so first of all, this is partially true. And then at OSU, we do experience short of faculty in this subject area. So with Dr. Choi's departure to Seoul, that makes the situation even worse. So I think OSU might not be the only example. This kind of situations happens pretty often across the country, is that in this area of semiconductor and integrated circuit design, we need more teachers, faculty who are versed of the topic and open and create the curriculum, like you said, that those who are interested can learn. So right now, the thing at OSU is that we are kind of maxed out the fundamentals of the semiconductor, this course, which is for our undergraduate. I have to teach it. We have 60 students, maximum amount of enrollment in our class, and we don't have anyone else in the faculty who are nearly familiar with the topic. So I teach it semester over semester over semester, but still, that kind of essentially leaved out the other bandwidth of the other exciting materials I could have taught once you know the basics. So I hope is that in future that folks like you and in other students who are considering graduate schools would realize that there's a huge need here, and our country needs it, and our educational system, our college, our universities needs people like you and I to be here and to talk about these issues and develop a course about it, so that wouldn't happen again for future international students who come to U.S. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. That's very clear. Could I, somehow contribute as an industrial engineer for the last year? That's my question.
The short answer is yes. And actually, I was just running into your department head this afternoon when we were, yeah. So there are a few, so we got contacted by many other faculty, graduate students, researchers in other disciplines. So for instance, there are applications where they need chips. For example, we have a great educational, agricultural research at OSU. They want to sense what is the moisture level, what kind of nutrients are in our soil. And to do that sensing, they need sensors. They need sensing chips. So they come to us, well, can you design this kind of chip for us? Can you design this board for us? And my question to her, first one was, what exactly do you want to sense? What is the accuracy? What is the precision? What is the range? And then I don't have that knowledge for that. So it is on these kind of topics where you, as closer to your industrial application, tell me what are the things that you would like to know through a semiconductor sensing chip. Then I can tell you what are the engineering costs and what kind of solutions we can propose. And that if necessary, we can even build custom chips, what we call fully custom integrated circuits, to meet that particular need. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, research-wise and even product development-wise, in those kind of areas.
Well, again, thank you both. Let's take a moment to thank our presenters this evening. That's good. So in closing this evening, I think this was a great representation of what this program is trying to uplift, the conversations between students, faculty here on campus, interdisciplinary projects that are existing within the OSU community. So with that, we thank Dr. John Hu and Dr. Erin Dyke for their comments and dedication to their fields and to be here this evening and share their ideas with us. For those of you who are here and are online, if you are interested in keeping up with upcoming events related to Science Café, you can find information regarding that at OkStateLibrary on all available platforms, and a rebroadcast will be on the YouTube channel at OkStateLibrary. Again, that's on every platform available, so you can't miss it. Thank you again to our presenters this evening and everybody who contributed to this program. Thank you and good night.